We find our archival team in the depths of the partially reclaimed dwarf city of Deepstone Delve.
Yes, I'm sure this will do for a base camp. Everybody can take an hour of rest, and then it's on to the exciting job of note-taking. Ha-ha!
Really? Elves! There are elves in the depths! They're robbing our fallen!
How dare they!
Desecration! Treacherous knife-ears!
We cannot let this stand! Arm up, lads! Let's go teach them a lesson!
Yeah,
we'll show them!
As the dwarves rush towards their foe, Archivist Dolmir begins to hobble after them.
Yes, well, we cannot let them disturb our research. Don't forget to record, well, everything.
Oh dear.
Come along, Torig, do keep up.
Magi, Harthan. I've followed the dwarf as requested, and it seems we have been discovered. So soon? Well, that is an ill omen. Very well, gather what valuables you can, and then we'll have to retreat deeper into this god's forsaken mountain. We're playing a custom scenario, the Charnel grounds, the details of which you can find in the description below if you want to give it a go yourself. Treasures are deployed as usual, and we're going to roll for deployment side. With a dice roll of 10 or below, the dwarves deploy on the left with the elves on the right. Deploying within 6 inches of their door, the dwarves gather in 2 groups at either end of their starting corridor, and the elves deploy in 3 groups in the centre of their starting room. Successfully casting Animate Construct before the game, Archivist Dolmir is accompanied by a small construct. Initiative on the first turn goes to the dwarves. Throud, the sneak, clambers over the barricade in front of him and rushes forward towards the treasure. Archivist Dolmir's great age catches up with him, and clambering over the barricade, he lands breathless and unable to voice the verbal components of his telekinesis spell.
Alright, Dolmir, slow it down. You're not as young as you used to be.
Thaneer, the infantry dwarf, takes the long way round, afraid of embarrassing himself as he watches Dolmir untangling his robes from the wooden detritus behind him.
I'll go round.
Danaea, the elf thief, dashes forward and, spotting a glimpse of something shiny, quickly scoops it up. Taking a moment to look around, it seems his presence hasn't drawn unwanted attention. Harthan Moonsworn takes a moment to cast a glamour upon himself. His features appearing to an observer as the most beautiful man they have ever seen. No change, really. He then glides forward into the doorway to observe the charnel grounds before him. Girthon, the infantry elf, darts through the doorway, moving into a position to protect Danaea and Harthan as they retrieve the goods. They shall not pass me. Crake, the sneak, runs around the wall, ducking into the doorway to his right to secure the dwarf goods therein.
Oh, what have we got here?
Torig lumbers forward, laden with his master's notes and scribblings, and taking cover behind some rubble, spots the glint of gold in the shadows ahead. Briefly consulting his spellbook, he casts telekinesis,
Uklutu Zylu,
pulling the treasure towards him. Magrin, the dwarf at arms, moves up to take position forward of Torig to buffer threats with a shield.
You just keep your head down, Torig. Old Magrin will show you how it's done.
Tethian, the elven archer, scoots forward, ducking through doorways until he reaches the open. The shifting treasure draws his eye to the dwarf apprentice Torig, and he hastily looses an arrow in the dwarf's direction. Ducking with a yelp, the arrow zips through the air above Torig's head to shatter against the stone wall behind him. Nestriel Dawn Shadow intends to shroud her features with a beauty spell, but somehow forgot to roll.
Hardly necessary.
Before moving out to stand behind Tethian, with the rogue Gadarian providing some light and silhouetting them in the doorway.
Do keep that light away.
Amram, the infantry dwarf, and Ingod, the thug, rush wide on the dwarf left, moving up around Torig and the ancient Oathstone, while on the right, the thug Druki swings wide. Mordrim, the ranger, scales the crates and ducks into cover behind a pile of rubble, and the small construct vaults the barricade and moves across the doorway behind the sneak, Throud.
I know it's made of rock, but it still gives me the creeps.
With a soft bark, the warhound Nare bounds through the doorway before slinking along the wall to the corner. The apothecary Edenor moves up behind the wizard Harthan, preparing to administer aid to those that need it.
Apothecary ready?
Habador the archer ducks through the gaping hole in the wall to take cover behind a group of barrels. Spotting Thraud the sneak in the open, he looses a hasty shot at the dwarf, but it's wide and skips off the wall beside his target. Thendaya the rogue follows Habador through the hole and, spotting treasure on the ground, swiftly scoops it up.
This is going to be too easy.
At that moment, a ghostly howl is heard through the halls, and a wraith slides through the door behind the dwarves.
Druke, you forgot to close the door. I did close it. He just walked through like it weren't there.
Shadowed features sweeping the hall before it, the wraith's gaze falls upon the closest dwarf, Archivist Dolmir, and it glides forward, passing through the barricade to catch the wizard.
Oh, that's just not fair.
Turn 2 starts with Dolmir calling for help. Mordrim vaults the rubble and ducks down behind the crates to get himself out of the way, as Thin Air and the small construct rush to Dolmir's aid. Spotting the elf rogue looting dwarven treasures, Mordrim growls and releases a hasty shot towards Thendaya, but he misjudges the range in the dim light and the arrow passes between the elf's knees. With the help of his allies, Dolmir manages to drive the wraith back over the barricade, but its insubstantial form means that the dwarves' weapons have no effect on the ghostly creature. To buy time and space for Dolmir to cast a spell on the wraith, the construct follows its retreat, keeping the ethereal form busy. With the monster occupied, Thin Air gives Dolmir a nod and moves towards the action in the centre. Danaer begins to haul his treasure back to base, but as he turns, he's assaulted from all sides by ghostly visions. Panicking, he scrambles away, and the haunting apparitions fade as abruptly as they appeared.
Kieran's doom! What was that?
Heart thundering in his chest, he cautiously continues his retreat.
What are you doing, Danaer? Get the treasure back. Swiftly.
Distracted by Danaer's strange antics, Harthan casts a wizard eye on the wall ahead of him. But the weave is strange here in the depths, and without his full focus, Harthan loses control of the energies, which rack his mind and leave him seeing stars for a moment.
Talia's grace, Danaer. I'm trying to focus.
He moves forward in an attempt to clear his head. Girthon, alerted by the flash of Habador's arrow and the oafish stomp of the dwarven feet, sweeps around the corner, longsword flashing out. Thraud dives aside at the last moment, the sudden appearance of the elf taking him all but by surprise. Girthon's longsword slices through the sneak's dark woolen tunic, the tip leaving a line of red up the dwarf's right arm as he scrambles out of the way. Torrig peeks over the rubble he's sheltering behind and attempts to draw the treasure closer once more. But with half a mind on elven arrows, he cannot summon the necessary focus.
Oh dear.
Bent low under his heavy pack, he displaces, scrambling behind another pile of rubble. Magrin moves up on the treasure, but redirects at the last moment as he spots the warhound around the corner.
They've brought a wee doggy.
Amram and Ingod rush forward along the wall, Amram making for the cover of the ruined supplies, and Ingod the barrels, both keen for shelter with an archer watching over the area.
Quickly, don't give that string fiddler a target.
As Amram crosses the open, Tethian draws and tracks his movement, releasing his arrow just before the dwarf reaches cover. An almighty clang rings out as the arrow strikes the dwarf's helm, and Amram immediately goes limp, crashing into the pile of sacks and crates to be buried, unmoving beneath them. Holding position for a moment to observe the flight of his arrow, Tethian then flits forward to take up position behind the barrels. Nastriel follows swift on his heels, and spotting the dwarf at arms charging the warhound Nare, pulls a feather from her component pouch and grasps strands of the weave.
Distrahin's penna.
However, the weave reacts violently to her touch, and she grips her head in her hands as the magical feedback pulses through her mind in a kaleidoscope of colours. Gadarian serpentines through the obstacles in his path as he nimbly advances on the treasure. Crake secures the dwarven artifact at his feet and makes his way back out the door and towards friendly lines, calling for cover as he goes.
I've got this one.
The commotion in this area has attracted another wandering creature, as an uncontrolled small construct makes its way into the hall from behind the dwarves. Of course. Druki continues his run around the right flank. The elven archer Habador looses towards the dwarf ranger Mordrim, sheltering behind a pile of crates. The arrow strikes, blasting the rotten timbers to pieces, but missing the dwarf himself. With a chill running down his spine, the rogue Thendale drags the treasure he's claimed back through the hole in the wall, the creeping feeling of being watched prominent in his thoughts. Nare lunges forward as Magrin approaches, snapping jaws seeking limbs, but thrust ahead, Magrin's stout shield checks the warhound's assault. While the hound scrabbles ineffectually at the unyielding barrier, Magrin delivers a heavy false-edge cut over the top, his broad blade biting deep to open up the warhound's shoulder and flank. With Nare yelping in pain, Magrin continues to push his advantage. Hungering for life, the Wraith demolishes Dolmir's small construct with a howl of rage, scattering its pieces across the hall, before once more falling on the wizard himself. The unsupervised small construct makes a beeline for the apprentice Torrig. Turn 3 starts with another call for help. Pelted with small rocks from the destroyed construct, Thynia turns around to find the Wraith descending on Archivist Dolmir once again. With a shout of rage, he charges the creature, sledge raised. As he sweeps out with the hammer, hoping to drive the Wraith back, the hooded monster turns on him. Reaching through the swinging weapon, it grasps the dwarf by the shoulders, its hooded head before the dwarf's own. Inhaling deeply, silvery life force is drawn from Thynia's mouth and eyes to disappear into the shadowed depths of the Wraith's hood. The dwarf's cries of pain are suddenly silenced as the Wraith lets go, dropping Thynia to lie catatonic at its feet. Drawing his sword, Mordrim the Ranger leaps over the crates and comes to the aid of Thraud the Sneak. 2 dwarves should be more than a match for some prissy sword elf.
You go low, I'll go lower.
As Thraud distracts the elf, Mordrim lunges for his kidney, but Girathan is wise to their plan and nimbly sidesteps, his long sword arcing from low to high to carve a line through the flank of the ranger's tunic, leaving a bright score in the mail shirt beneath.
Cack!
Bruised by the strike, Mordrim scrambles back before the infantry elf can strike again. Left alone now to face the Wraith, Dolmir tries to drive it back with his staff.
Oh, away with you!
But the Wraith ignores the glowing stave and grasps the elderly wizard. Tough as old boot leather, Dolmir tears himself from the creature's grasp, resisting the effects of its life drain.
Oh, no you don't!
Assaulted by new apparitions, Danae twists and scuttles back to escape the deathly visages and grasping ghostly hands.
Are you truly not seeing it?
Holding the treasure tight to his chest, he cautiously moves towards the archway. Putting Danae's antics from his mind, Harthan traces arcane glyphs in the air, casting a wizard's eye once more. But his concentration is broken again by a girlish squeal from behind him, and the magic unravels. Frustrated, he moves into a position where he can peer around the corner, the boring old-fashioned way, from a safe distance. Torrig scrambles through the rubble before him, finding a suitable sized rock to lob at the elven archer and apprentice. He begins to enchant it to explode on impact, but with an eye out for arrows from the dark, his concentration suffers and the stone bursts in his hand.
Hazadu, Aban, ow!
Swearing loudly, he shakes his throbbing digits before displacing and moving up to take cover in the doorway. Goldlust outweighing the potential danger, Ingod breaks from cover and dashes forward, stooping low to scoop up the treasure in the open. Tethian looses a snap shot as the dwarf approaches, but his timely stoop sees the arrow skim overhead. Nastriel weaves a glamour as the dwarven thug advances, and as he straightens triumphantly with the treasure in his hand, it fades from sight, no more than an illusion. The real treasure coming to rest at Gadarian's feet, having been inadvertently kicked forward by Ingod's rush. Crake dashes back along the wall towards the dwarven exit, treasure in hand, a dread shiver running down his spine, speeding his withdrawal. With a heavy boot, Magrin removes the Hound Nare from the fight. Then, turning to follow the jangling of coins, rushes the rogue, Guderian, as he begins to reach for the treasure. Druki continues his mad dash down the flank, ducking behind the barricade as he spots the archer Habador. Taking advantage of the distraction provided by Mordrin, the sneak Thraud reaches high and slams his dagger into the elf Girithon's back, puncturing mail and causing him to cry in pain, barely able to keep his feet. Thendale begins to make his way towards the exit, but scrambles away in fright as his vision fills with haunting phantasms.
Suriel, shelter me! What is that?
As the flashes fade, he gingerly approaches the exit. Feeling he's losing his mind, Danae flinches from further frightening forms, each more eerie than the last. Closing his eyes tight, he gropes towards the exit, death forefront in his thoughts. Realising he's needed, Edenor the apothecary moves out into the central area, readying his healing flask.
Do you require assistance?
Lances of pain ripping through his torso, Girithon grasps the blade of his longsword in his left hand, and just like paddling a canoe, drives the pommel behind him. With a resounding crack, it strikes Thraud between the eyes, laying him out cold on the stone floor. Dagger still embedded, Girithon staggers rearwards towards Edenor.
Ah! Filthy badger knifed me in the back!
Habador looses another arrow towards the ranger Mordrim, covering Girithon's retreat. But watching out of the corner of his eye, Mordrim ducks aside and avoids the feathered shaft. With the treasure gone and aware of the approaching thug, Habador falls back to the break in the wall. Swiftly straightening as the dwarf at arms charges, Guderian deftly spins around Magrin's thrusting sword, his own slicing out as he passes behind the dwarf's axe side. Striking between helm and mail, the elf blade severs muscle and artery, finally deflected by the inside of the dwarf's war mask. With a gurgling moan, Magrin sinks to the ground, dark blood fountaining from his ruined neck. Continuing his pirouette, Guderian bows low, scooping up the treasure with a flourish before it's touched by the rapidly spreading pool of red. The strong, independent small construct turns and staggers after Crake as he dashes by, stone claws reaching out to snare the dwarf. Ducking under the reaching arms, Crake shoulder checks the automaton, shoving it back and causing one of the arms to break and fall to the ground. Howling with hunger, the wraith reaches for Dolmir again, spectral claws sinking into the dwarf's shoulder. Hardy as all of his kin, Archivist Dolmir resists the drain of the wraith and pulls away once more. Turn 4 starts with Edenor treating Girithon, removing the knife and administering his healing potion to rapidly repair the wounded elf.
Be sure to undertake light exercise, keep hydrated, and no heavy lifting for at least 2 weeks.
With that advice, he withdraws to the archway. While Girithon takes a quick rest, Harthan the wizard attempts to enchant his longsword.
Incantare Telum. Ah!
But the magic backfires again, searing his mind, and he instead shifts over to berate Danae into getting a hurry on. Refreshed, Girithon charges Mordrim, sword snapping down towards the dwarf's head. The ranger lifts his own blade, stepping aside and parrying the descending strike. As Girithon matches Mordrim's sidestep, the two foes circling, he lifts his hands and thrusts his point down over the dwarf's raised blade, pressing his weight forward to puncture the dwarf's light mail. 6 inches of steel sinking beneath the dwarf's collarbone. Roaring in agony, Mordrim lashes out with his short sword, but the elf retreats, pulling his sword from the wound, and the ranger collapses to the ground, face white with pain. With allies falling all around him, Dolmir is forced to deal with the wraith alone. If he can make some space, he can destroy it with a magic spell. Unfortunately, the wraith refuses to cooperate, and securely grasping the dwarf, proceeds to drain his life force. Dolmir collapses to the ground, life hanging by a thread. Tethian looses another arrow at Ingod, but infuriated by the trickery of elves, he contemptuously dodges and cuts the arrow from the air with his sword. With things going in their favour, Nastriel glides through the doorway behind her, turning to gesture and call on the weave. With her concentration supple as a bow, she bends and flexes with the shifts of the magical threads, transposing herself with Guderian and transporting him to safety towards the exit. She graces the fuming Ingod with a self-satisfied smirk. Realising things are falling apart, Torug scoops up a pebble and from the safety of the doorway successfully enchants it to explode, before lobbing it behind the autonomous construct. It detonates, showering the golem in stone shards and shattering it to pieces. With the way clear, he rushes back to aid Crake and make for the exit.
Quick! Time to go!
Becoming accustomed to the horrifying images flashing before them, Thendair and Denair both ignore them and press towards the exit, Thendair making it out the door and securing the first treasure for the elves. Guderian, an ill feeling creeping into the back of his mind, also makes for the exit. Habador releases an arrow at the approaching thug Druki, but the shot is poor and it misses its target. When the arrow flashes by, Druki vaults over the barricade he's taken cover behind and sprints forward to duck behind the barrels, closing in on the elf archer. Ingod, furious at being tricked, charges the elf apprentice, slashing out with his blade. Nastriel regretting not casting a Charm of Beauty.
What are you preening for, you bald-cheeked chicken-legged floozy?
While editing this, I thought I just forgot about it, but apparently she didn't even cast it in the first place. Overconfident, she's slow to respond and the weapon strikes her in the hip as she scrambles back, leaving her limping. Still feeling a chill down his back, Crake continues to dash towards the exit.
Time to go? Alright, no need to tell me twice.
The Wraith still hungers, and sensing the strong life force of Girithon, surges towards the infantry elf. But the elf manages to dance around its reaching claws and force the creature back.
Wraith! Does anyone have a torch?
At the start of turn 5, Harthan is torn in two directions. He begins by responding to Girithon's call.
Hold it for a moment, I'll try this again. Incantare Telem!
He successfully casts Enchant Weapon on the infantry elf's longsword, before turning and rushing to the aid of his apprentice, Nastriel. Hurting from the dwarf's last strike, Nastriel circles Ingod, sizing him up and determined not to underestimate him again. With the cautious melee in front of him, Tethian manoeuvres to the side to line up a shot on Torug, the dwarf apprentice. Releasing his arrow, it strikes true, slamming into the back of the dwarf and burying itself in his backpack, giving the dwarf an extra shove towards the exit. Given that extra bit of propulsion, Torug turns and dashes towards the door. The ill feeling overcoming Guderian culminates in an assault with ghostly visions, panicking the elf and sending him scrambling away before he turns to the exit. Denair continues to shove the visions aside as he also rushes for the door. As a soft glow settles on Girithon's longsword, he switches to offense, charging forward to carve his blade through the insubstantial figure before him. With a final mournful howl, the wraith dissipates, and its ragged robes, suddenly corporeal, fall to the floor in a pile. Habador looses another arrow towards Druki as he rushes up behind the barrels. It strikes just before he reaches cover, punching through his shoulder to the fletchings protruding out the back.
Ah, you long-limbed bare-arse twig twiddler! Just wait till I get my hands on you!
Edenor watches the goings-on, content to just observe. Crake dashes through the door, the feeling of being watched following him as he exits the board, securing the treasure for the dwarves. Druki leaps up from behind the barrels and charges Habador.
I'm coming for you, elf!
The two combatants trade blows, neither able to land a strike on the other. Still incensed by elven trickery, Ingod bellows with fury and rushes Nastriel, tackling her around the thighs and throwing her bodily to the ground. As she crashes to the stone, Ingod plants a heavy boot into her ribs, before he's forced to switch his attention to the wizard Harthan, leaving the elven apprentice curled up in a ball on the ground. That's the end of turn 5, and the remaining dwarves fall back to regroup with 1 treasure, leaving the elves with the remaining 4. Look at the vermin scatter. Perhaps our early discovery was not such an ill omen after all. Oh, come now, do get up, Nastriel.
Quickly, grab them and let's get out of here. Who knew the depths to be crawling with knife ears?
Oof, that wraith really scuppered any plans the dwarves may have had. Rough game. Dolmir survives with a 10, tough as old boots. Mordrim, with a 7, was badly wounded and needs to rest up. Magrin, a 3, returns to the halls of his ancestors. Thin a 7, remains catatonic after the wraith attack. He should recover given time. Amram, a 10, wakes up a few minutes later with a headache, but otherwise is quite fine. And Throud, with a 5, was addled pretty badly by that knock to the head and will need a little time to rest, though thankfully his replacement will be free. The elves, however, did really well for themselves. Nastriel, with a 14, suffers from wounded pride, and Nare, with an 8, was cut up pretty bad and will require Edenor's attentions before being able to return to the fight. As for the treasure, I'm rolling on a custom Dwarven depth chart. Basically it's got more weapons and items than it does grimoires. The dwarves get 1 treasure and they receive, of course, rolling a 1, 50 gold coins. The elves secured the remaining 4, including the central treasure. Firstly, with a 15, they get 40 gold coins and a magic item. Secondly, a 3, D20 times 20 gold coins, let's roll that now. A 6 giving them 120 gold coins. Thirdly, a 20, 40 gold coins and a grimoire. And finally, a 15, which is 40 gold coins and a magic item. For the grimoire, we'll roll a 10 followed by an 8, telekinesis, that'll be handy. And for their magic items, a 1, staff of power, and a 13, amulet of resistance. Well, I think we can safely say the elves won that bout. Let's see if the dwarves get the upper hand next time. Thanks very much for watching.